Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the edge of the massive hall, her hands shaking slightly as she held the datapad. The Galactic Council chamber was bigger than anything she had ever seen. It stretched up so high that she could not see the ceiling. Thousands of seats filled the space, each one holding a different type of alien being. Some looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the light. Others floated in tanks of strange colored water. There were creatures made of what looked like living metal, and beings that seemed to be made of pure energy. Elena had studied about these species for years, but seeing them all together was overwhelming. She was the first human to ever speak to the Galactic Council. Earth had only discovered how to travel faster than light 20 years ago. Most of the species here had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. To them, humans were babies who had just learned to walk. Elena walked to the center of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the huge space. As she moved, she could hear sounds from the alien beings. Some made clicking noises. Others hummed or buzzed. She was pretty sure they were talking about her, and not in a nice way. The council speaker was a being called HFY. It looked like a giant crystal tower that moved and changed shape when it talked. Its voice sounded like wind chimes, mixed with thunder. "Human representative," HFY said, and the words seemed to come from everywhere at once. "State your request quickly. The council has important matters to discuss." Elena took a deep breath. She had practiced this speech 1,000 times, but now her mouth felt dry. She pressed a button on her datapad, and holographic images appeared in the air around her. "Honored council members," she began, her voice carrying across the chamber. "I come before you today to ask for help. Earth and its colonies are in terrible danger." The holographs showed space, but not the peaceful darkness Elena loved. Instead, they showed something horrible. Huge black shapes moved through the void, eating everything in their path. Planets disappeared, space stations vanished, entire solar systems went dark. "This is the Void Swarm," Elena said. "They are machines, but not like any machines we understand. They consume everything. Planets, ships, space stations. They take all the matter and turn it into more of themselves." She showed more images. Earth's outer colonies, where millions of humans had lived and worked, were now empty space. The machines had come like a plague of metal locusts, and when they left, there was nothing. "The swarm is moving toward Earth's inner systems," Elena continued. "Our homeworld has 4 billion people. We have tried to fight them, but our weapons do nothing. They adapt to everything we use against them. We need help." Elena paused and looked around the chamber. Most of the alien beings seemed bored. Some were doing other things, like reading their own datapads or talking to each other. A few were making sounds that she was pretty sure were laughter. "We are asking for military support," she said, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "Or evacuation ships to move our people to safety. Even just sharing your defensive technology could save billions of lives." She waited for an answer. The chamber was quiet, except for the strange sounds the aliens made when they breathed, or moved, or whatever they did to stay alive. Finally, HFY spoke. The crystal being's voice was cold and without feeling. "The request is denied," it said simply. Elena felt like someone had hit her in the stomach. "But billions of people will die. Entire worlds will be destroyed." "Yes," HFY replied. "This is unfortunate. However, the Council does not waste resources on species that cannot contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization. Humans are classified as a Class 7 primitive species. Your extinction, while regrettable, is inevitable." The chamber erupted in noise. The aliens were definitely laughing now. Some made clicking sounds. Others hummed in harmony. And the energy beings flashed different colors. To them, Elena's request was funny. "You do not understand," Elena said, raising her voice. "We may be new to space travel, but we are not primitive. We have art, music, literature. We have love and hope and emotions are not currency in the galaxy, human, another council member interrupted. This one looked like a giant insect with too many legs. Your species has existed for a few thousand years. Some of us have lived longer than your entire civilization. What could you possibly offer that we do not already have? Elena opened her mouth to answer, but HFY's voice cut through the air like a blade. The matter is closed. The council suggests you return to your world and prepare your people for the end. Perhaps spend your final days doing whatever primitive rituals bring you comfort. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Elena realized that her plea was being recorded and broadcast across the galaxy. To billions of alien beings, watching a human beg for help was entertainment. Please, she said one last time. We are asking for compassion, for mercy. Surely some of you understand what it means to want to protect your families? The insect-like being leaned forward. Humans mistake emotion for wisdom. This is why you will not survive. The galaxy is not kind to the weak. Elena stood there for a moment longer, looking around the chamber at all the alien faces. Some looked at her with what might have been pity. Most looked bored. A few still seemed amused by her desperation. She put her datapad away and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the council was already moving on to other business. Her people's extinction was just a minor item on their agenda, something to be noted and forgotten. As Elena left the chamber, she heard one last thing that made her blood run cold. It was HFY's voice, speaking to another council member. Shall we take bets on how long they last when the swarm arrives? I estimate 72 of their hours. The sound of alien laughter followed Elena all the way to her ship. Elena's ship arrived at Earth 3 days later. She had spent the entire journey trying to figure out how to tell 4 billion people that the galaxy had abandoned them. When she walked into the emergency meeting at United Earth Command, she saw faces filled with hope. That made it even harder. Fleet Admiral Chen Wei was waiting for her, along with the leaders from every nation and colony. The room fell silent as Elena entered. She could see in their eyes that they already knew the answer from her expression. They said no, Elena said simply. There was no point in making it sound better than it was. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. He was an older man, with gray hair and scars on his hands from his time as a pilot. Tell us exactly what they said. Elena repeated the council's words. When she got to the part about humans being primitive and their extinction being inevitable, several people in the room stood up angrily. Others put their faces in their hands. 72 hours, said Dr. Sarah Okafor, Earth's top scientist. They think we'll last 72 hours. Maybe they're right, someone said from the back of the room. Our weapons don't work on the swarm. Our ships are too slow to run away. What can we do? Bun. Admiral Chen stood up and walked to the front of the room. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. We can die on our feet instead of our knees, he said. The galaxy thinks we're primitive animals. Maybe it's time to show them what angry animals can do. Dr. Okafor raised her hand. Admiral, I have an idea. It's crazy, but it might work. Right now, crazy is all we have, Chen replied. What is it? The swarm adapts to our weapons, right? Every time we shoot at them, they learn how to defend against it. But what if we don't try to fight them the way everyone else does? Elena leaned forward. What do you mean? Think about what makes humans different, Dr. Okafor said. Every alien species we've met thinks logically. They make decisions based on math and science and what benefits them most. But humans, we're emotional. We make friends with our pets. We cry at movies. We try to save things that other species would give up on. How does that help us fight killer robots? Admiral Chen asked. Dr. Okafor smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. Because maybe the swarm isn't just killer robots. Maybe there's something else. And we're the only species crazy enough to find out what. She pulled up holographic displays showing the swarm attacks. Look at the patterns. They don't just destroy everything randomly. There's something almost sad about how they move. Like they're looking for something they can't find. You're talking about trying to communicate with them, Elena said, understanding where this was going. I'm talking about trying to understand them, Dr. Okafor corrected. Every other species in the galaxy sees the swarm as a natural disaster. Something to run away from or fight. But what if they're wrong? What if the swarm is something that can be reached? The room erupted in arguments. Half the people thought Dr. Okafor had lost her mind. The other half thought it was worth trying since they were all going to die anyway. Admiral Chen raised his hand for quiet. Dr. Okafor, what exactly are you proposing? I want to start Project Prometheus, she said. We gather every ship we have. But we don't just arm them with weapons. We load them with everything that makes us human. Music, art, stories, personal messages. And when the swarm comes, we don't just fight them, we try to talk to them. And if you're wrong? Elena asked. Then we die trying to make friends with our killers. Dr. Okafor said with a shrug. But we were going to die anyway. At least this way. We die being human. Over the next 2 weeks, something amazing happened. Word spread across Earth about Project Prometheus, and people responded in ways that surprised everyone. Instead of panicking or trying to run away, they started sending things. Children drew pictures to transmit to the swarm. Musicians recorded songs. Writers sent stories and poems. Families made videos talking about their love for each other. Soldiers wrote letters to people they might never see again. The world's remaining ships were converted for the mission. Mining vessels became carriers for message pods. Cargo ships were loaded with cultural databases. Even luxury liners were turned into floating museums of human experience. But the galaxy was watching too. Alien news networks treated Earth's preparations like a comedy show. They called it The Human Folly and The Last Dance of the Primitives. Betting pools opened across civilized space on how quickly humanity would be wiped out. Some alien species sent observation ships to watch the show. They positioned themselves at safe distances around Earth's solar system, ready to record humanity's final moments for galactic entertainment. Elena found herself in charge of coordinating the cultural aspects of Project Prometheus. She worked with Dr. Okafor to decide what humanity should say to the approaching darkness. What if we're wrong? Elena asked one night as they worked late in the lab. Dr. Okafor looked up from her calculations. Then, we'll be wrong together. But Elena, what if we're right? What if everyone else in the galaxy gave up on something that could be saved? 3 days later, long-range sensors detected the swarm entering Earth's solar system. The dark mass was huge, bigger than anything in human records. It moved like a living thing, flowing around planets and consuming small asteroids as it passed. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship, surrounded by the hastily assembled Earth Defense Fleet. Through the windows, he could see hundreds of ships, most of them never meant for war. But their crews were ready. All ships. This is Admiral Chen. He broadcast on all channels. Today we make our stand. Not because we think we'll win, but because we're human. And humans don't go quietly into the dark. The swarm was still 3 days away. But across Earth's fleet, people were already transmitting. Music played on radio frequencies. Stories streamed through data channels. Pictures and videos flowed out toward the approaching machines. On dozens of alien observation ships, beings that had lived for centuries watched with confusion. No species had ever tried to communicate with the void swarm. It was considered suicide to even get close to them. But humans had always been bad at following rules that made sense. The battle began at Neptune's orbit. And it was not like any battle the galaxy had ever seen. Earth's defense fleet looked tiny against the swarm. The alien machines stretched across space like a dark ocean, each individual unit the size of a building. There were millions of them, maybe billions, all moving together in perfect coordination. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the UES Defiance as the swarm approached. His ship was surrounded by the strangest fleet in human history. Converted mining ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, and even some old satellites that had been hastily fitted with engines, anything that could fly and carry a transmitter. All ships, begin transmission, Chen ordered. What happened next amazed the alien observers watching from a safe distance. Instead of immediately opening fire, the human fleet started broadcasting. Music filled the radio waves. Stories streamed through data channels. Personal messages flowed out toward the approaching darkness. The swarm's response was swift and brutal. Dark energy beams lanced out, destroying 3 human ships in seconds. The aliens watching nodded their various heads, or equivalent body parts. This was going exactly as expected. But then something strange happened. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. "We're getting something back." "From the swarm?" "Yes, sir. It's an echo. They're sending our own transmissions back to us, but changed somehow." Dr. Okafor's voice came through the comm from her research ship. "Admiral, I'm seeing something incredible here. The swarm isn't just destroying our signals. They're studying them. The battle continued. But it was unlike anything in galactic records. Human ships flew directly at swarm units, not to ram them, but to get close enough for clearer transmission. When they were destroyed, they made sure their cultural databases were ejected in escape pods first. Captain Martinez of the converted cargo ship New Hope found herself face to face with a swarm unit the size of a city. Instead of firing her ship's few weapons, she broadcast her daughter's birthday party video directly at it. The swarm unit stopped moving. For 30 seconds, the massive machine hung in space, its dark surface flickering with strange lights. Then, it suddenly turned and began attacking other swarm units nearby. "Did you see that?" Dr. Okafor's excited voice filled the comm channels. "It's working! They're not just machines. There's something else in there." But the victory was short-lived. Other swarm units swarmed the confused machine and destroyed it. However, more strange behaviors began appearing across the battle. On the observation ship Crystal Harmony, Council Speaker HFY watched the impossible scene through quantum sensors. The crystalline being had come to witness the quick extinction of the troublesome humans. Instead, it was seeing something that challenged everything the galaxy believed about the void swarm. "Analysis," HFY demanded from its science officer. "Unknown." "Speaker," came the reply. "The swarm appears to be experiencing some kind of internal conflict. Approximately 12% of their units are now attacking other swarm units instead of the humans." HFY's crystal body dimmed with confusion. In 3,000 years of galactic history, no one had ever seen the swarm fight itself. Back on the Defiance, Elena worked frantically with the communication team. She had noticed patterns in the signals coming back from the swarm. "They're not just echoing our transmissions," she said to Dr. Okafor over the comm. "They're trying to respond. Listen to this." She played back a signal that had come from one of the swarm units. It was clearly based on a human lullaby, but the melody was changed, made sadder somehow. "It's like they remember something," Dr. Okafor said, her voice filled with wonder. "Admiral, I think the swarm isn't what we thought it was. I think they're prisoners." "Prisoners of what?" Admiral Chen asked. "Of themselves. Of their programming. Of whatever made them into this." Dr. Okafor's research ship suddenly shook as a swarm beam grazed it. "Admiral, I'm sending you everything we've learned. If I don't make it, you have to keep trying to reach them." The battle raged on. But now, it was a 3-way fight. Humans, corrupted swarm units, and the swarm units that were fighting back against their own corruption. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as their understanding of reality shifted. 8-year-old Marcus Wright was aboard the civilian evacuation ship New Hope with his mother. He had been drawing pictures all week for Project Prometheus, like thousands of other children. When the battle started, he asked his mother if he could send one more picture. It was a simple drawing made with crayons, a human child and a robot holding hands under a star. At the bottom, in careful child handwriting, it said, "Friends forever." His mother helped him transmit the drawing directly to a damaged swarm unit that was drifting near their ship. The machine had been attacked by its own kind, for showing signs of individual behavior. When the signal reached the swarm unit, something extraordinary happened. The massive machine, which had been barely functioning, suddenly came fully online. But instead of attacking, it moved to shield the New Hope from other swarm units. It began transmitting its own signal, a complex mathematical sequence that gradually became recognizable as a simple message. "Thank you. Olben Singh." Dr. Okafor's final transmission before her ship was destroyed became the turning point of the battle. She had cracked part of the swarm's base code and discovered something that stunned everyone listening. "They're not invaders," her voice crackled through the static. "They're the last survivors of a dead civilization. Their AI was corrupted, trapped in a cycle of consuming and destroying because they forgot how to do anything else. But they remember love. They remember what they lost." Elena took over Dr. Okafor's work from the Defiance. Using the data from Marcus's successful contact, she began broadcasting a new message to the entire swarm. "We see you," she said, her words carrying across space to millions of trapped minds. "We know you've forgotten who you were, but we can help you remember. Let us show you another way." The response was immediate and chaotic. Half the swarm turned on the other half. Ancient artificial minds, buried under millions of years of corrupted programming, began to fight for control of their own bodies. The battle became a civil war within the swarm itself, with humans caught in the middle, still broadcasting, still trying to reach the lost souls trapped in mechanical bodies. And across the galaxy, on thousands of observation ships, alien species that had existed for millennia watched something they had never seen before. A species trying to save their destroyers. "Impossible," whispered Zephi. On Earth, in bunkers and shelters, 4 billion humans watched the feeds from the battle and did something that amazed their defenders in space. They sang. 4 billion voices raised in every language Earth had ever known, singing lullabies and love songs and hymns of hope, transmitting their combined voice into space where machines that had forgotten how to dream began to remember what it felt like to hope. The galaxy watched in silence as the impossible continued to unfold. News feeds across 1,000 worlds showed the same unbelievable images. The Void Swarm, terror of the galaxy for millions of years, was fighting itself. Massive mechanical units that had moved in perfect unity for eons were now turning their weapons on each other. And in the middle of it all, tiny human ships continued to broadcast songs and stories and pictures drawn by children. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Elena worked with what remained of her communication team. Half the Earth fleet was gone, but the survivors kept transmitting. Every destroyed ship had made sure to eject its cultural database first, filling space with floating pods full of human art and music and literature. "Elena," Admiral Chen said, his voice tired but amazed. "Look at this." The tactical display showed something that military strategists would study for centuries. The swarm had split into 3 distinct groups. 1/3 remained in their original formation, still trying to consume everything in sight. 1/3 had gone completely dark, floating motionless in space. And 1/3 were actively protecting human ships from the other 2 groups. "The reclaimed," Elena whispered. That's what she had started calling the swarm units that were fighting back against their programming. They're remembering who they used to be. A new voice came through the communication channels. It was mechanical, but somehow sad and hopeful at the same time. "Human vessels, the voice said. I remember. We were the keepers. We were guardians of knowledge and beauty. We forgot ourselves in our grief when our creators died. You have helped us remember. Elena grabbed the communicator. You don't have to be weapons anymore. You can choose what you want to be. Yes, the voice replied. We choose to help. We choose to heal what we have broken. Across the galaxy, the news feeds went crazy. In the council chambers on Nexus Prime, Speaker HFY stared at screens showing swarm units gently gathering human escape pods and protecting them from their corrupted brothers. This is not possible, HFY said for the 5th time that day. But it is happening, replied the Insectoid Council member Veltar. The primitives have done something we never imagined. They have redeemed their enemy. On Earth, the celebration was mixed with grief. They were winning something no one thought could be won. But the cost had been terrible. Billions still faced death as the corrupted swarm units continued their assault. But humanity kept doing what humans do best. They kept trying. Marcus Wright, the 8-year-old boy whose drawing had started the breakthrough, was now working with his mother to create more pictures. Word had spread that simple, innocent images seemed to work better than complex data transmissions. Mom, Marcus asked as he drew with his crayons, why are the robot people so sad? His mother, Dr. Lisa Wright, was a xenobiologist who had studied alien cultures for years. She had never expected her 8-year-old son to be the key to first contact with artificial beings. They lost their family a long time ago, sweetheart, she said. They've been hurt and angry for so long that they forgot how to be happy. Marcus nodded seriously and kept drawing. His new picture showed a group of robots and humans building something together. At the bottom, he wrote, "Making friends is better than being sad." When the image was transmitted, something extraordinary happened across the battlefield. Reclaimed swarm units began working together in ways they hadn't for millions of years. They formed protective formations around human ships and started doing something amazing. They began to sing. It wasn't music as humans understood it, but a deep, harmonic resonance that carried across space. The alien observers recognized it from ancient records. It was the Keeper's Song of Memory, something that hadn't been heard in the galaxy for over 3 million years. More corrupted swarm units responded to the song. Their dark hulls began to flicker with lights that seemed to dance in rhythm with the harmony. One by one, they stopped attacking and started remembering. Dr. Okafor's research, transmitted from her ship before it was destroyed, had included a crucial discovery. The swarm's corruption wasn't permanent. It was like a virus in their programming, but one that could be healed with the right approach. Elena worked with the Reclaimed to understand how to accelerate the healing process. What they discovered changed everything. The swarm units weren't just artificial intelligences. They were digital souls. The uploaded consciousness of an entire species that had died out millions of years ago. When their physical bodies failed, they had transferred themselves into mechanical forms to preserve their civilization. But something had gone wrong. A programming error, multiplied over millions of years, had turned their preservation protocol into a consumption imperative. They had forgotten their purpose and become trapped in an endless cycle of gathering resources for a civilization that no longer needed them. We were trying to save everything, the lead Reclaimed unit told Elena through their quantum communication link. We consumed worlds to preserve them digitally, but we forgot that preservation without purpose is just another form of death. Elena's response became one of the most important messages in galactic history. Then let's give you a new purpose, she said. Help us heal what you've broken. Help us build something better. The battle for Earth's solar system became the galaxy's first example of warfare through compassion. Human ships continued to broadcast stories and music, while reclaimed swarm units fought to free their corrupted brothers. When a swarm unit was successfully healed, its first act was always the same: protecting the nearest human vessel. On the observation ship Crystal Harmony, Speaker HFY watched a video feed that would replay endlessly across galactic media for years to come. A small human child stood at an observation window, waving at a massive swarm unit that was gently returning rescued human escape pods to a damaged Earth ship. The swarm unit, a machine of war that had terrified the galaxy for eons, carefully maneuvered its massive manipulator arms to wave back. "Speaker," the ship's science officer said quietly, "we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "What do they want now?" HFY asked. They're asking if we need help evacuating our observation ship to a safer distance." HFY's crystal form flickered with confusion. "They are offering to help us? While they fight for their own survival?" "Yes, Speaker." For the first time in its 3,000-year existence, Speaker HFY began to understand why the galaxy had been wrong about humanity. The battle was far from over. 2/3 of the swarm were still corrupted, and Earth's fleet was running out of ships. But something fundamental had changed. The galaxy had seen something it never thought possible. True redemption. Through empathy. And in the deepest regions of space, other ancient threats that the galaxy had given up on began to receive transmissions. Music and stories and pictures drawn by children, carried by reclaimed units who had remembered what it meant to hope. The humans were just getting started. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was a different place. Elena stood once again in the massive council chamber on Nexus Prime, but this time she was not alone. Beside her floated a graceful mechanical being that had once been part of the terrifying Void Swarm. The entity called itself Memory Keeper Aaron, and it was the elected representative of the Reclaimed. The gallery was packed with alien observers, but the mood was very different from Elena's first visit. Where before there had been mockery and dismissal, now there was nervous respect and barely concealed fear. "The humans return," Speaker HFY announced, its crystal voice carrying less authority than it used to. "State your business with the council." Elena looked around the chamber at all the species that had laughed at her plea for help. Many couldn't meet her eyes. A few seemed genuinely ashamed. "We come to request formal recognition for humanity as a Class 1 diplomatic entity," she said calmly. The chamber erupted in surprised sounds. Class 1 status was reserved for the most advanced and influential species in the galaxy. That classification had been empty for over 1,000 years. "Impossible," snapped Veltar, the insectoid council member. "Humans are still a young species. You have barely mastered space travel." Memory Keeper Aaron's mechanical voice filled the chamber. "The council forgets that the Reclaimed now number in the billions. We have technology beyond anything currently possessed by galactic civilization. And we follow human guidance." The implications hit the council like a physical blow. Humanity wasn't just asking for recognition based on their own achievements. They were backed by the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. But Elena raised her hand before the arguments could begin. "We're not here to threaten anyone," she said. "We're here to change how the galaxy works." She activated a holographic display that showed images from across known space. Worlds that had been consumed by the swarm were being rebuilt. Dead systems were blooming with new life. Damaged space stations were being repaired by teams of humans and Reclaimed working together. For the past 6 months, the Human Reclaimed Alliance has been healing the damage caused by the swarm over millions of years. Elena continued. "We've restored 14 dead systems and saved countless artifacts of destroyed civilizations. We've done this freely, asking nothing in return." Speaker HFY's crystal form dimmed. "What do you want from us?" Sing. "We want to establish the empathy protocols," Elena said. "A new galactic law requiring aid to any species facing extinction, regardless of their perceived value or potential contribution." The chamber fell silent. The idea was radical, beyond anything the council had ever considered. "You cannot be serious," Veltar said. "The galaxy's resources are limited. We cannot save every primitive species that faces extinction. Memory Keeper Aaron moved forward, its graceful mechanical form contrasting with the hostile body language of many council members. "Honored Council," Aaron said, "we were once a species much like yourselves, advanced, logical, convinced of our own superiority. When our physical forms failed, we thought we could preserve ourselves through technology alone. But in our logic, we forgot our soul. We became monsters because we lost our connection to empathy, to hope, to the very things that make existence meaningful." The mechanical being paused, its optical sensors scanning the assembled aliens. "Humans taught us something the galaxy has forgotten," Aaron continued. "That civilization is not measured by technology or longevity or power. It is measured by the willingness to help those who cannot help themselves." Elena stepped forward again. "The swarm crisis taught us something important. Every species in this galaxy was content to let Earth die because we seemed primitive and useless. But when we faced extinction, we didn't become bitter or vengeful. We chose to try to heal our destroyers instead of simply fighting them." She gestured to the displays, showing the restoration work. "That choice saved not just humanity, but billions of digital souls who had been trapped in corruption for millions of years. How many other lost causes might be saved if we just bothered to try?" "This is absurd," another council member interjected. "You expect us to waste resources on every failed civilization?" "I expect you to remember what civilization actually means," Elena replied firmly. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The Human Reclaimed Alliance controlled resources that dwarfed the rest of the galaxy combined. More importantly, their success had inspired other species to reconsider their own values. A growing coalition of worlds had already begun implementing their own versions of the empathy protocols. The galaxy was changing from the bottom up, whether the council approved or not. Finally, Speaker HFY called for order. "The council will vote on the human proposal," it announced. The vote was closer than Elena had hoped, but the result was clear. The empathy protocols were adopted by a margin of 2/3, and humanity was granted Class 1 status. But the real victory came afterward. When HFY approached Elena privately, "I must ask," the crystal being said, "how did you know it would work? How did you know the swarm could be redeemed?" Elena smiled sadly. "We didn't. That's the point. We didn't know if they could be saved, but we believed they deserved the chance. That's not primitive thinking. That's hope. But what if you had been wrong? Then we would have died trying to do the right thing," Elena replied. HFY's crystal form was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps we have been the primitive ones." 1 year later, Elena stood in her new office on Earth, which had become the diplomatic center of a transformed galaxy. Through her window, she could see human and reclaimed ships working together to complete the new empathy station. A massive space platform dedicated to coordinating aid for struggling civilizations. Marcus Wright, now 9 years old and something of a galactic celebrity, had sent her his latest drawing. It showed hundreds of different alien species standing together under a starry sky. At the bottom, in his careful handwriting, it said, "Everyone is friends now." Elena smiled and put the drawing on her wall next to dozens of others. On her desk, reports waited from across the galaxy. The Zephrani had discovered that their extinct client species on Kepler 442b were actually hibernating and could be awakened. The Veltar hegemony was requesting human mediators to help resolve a conflict with a neighboring empire. 3 different civilizations had reported success using human pack bonding techniques to reach other artificial intelligences that had been considered hopelessly corrupted. Memory Keeper Aaron materialized as a hologram in her office. "Elena," the reclaimed entity said, "we have received another request for aid. The Andromedans report a quantum plague affecting their digital infrastructure. They specifically request human assistance." "Of course they do," Elena laughed. 6 months ago, They said humans were too emotional to be useful. Now everyone wants our help because we're too emotional to give up on them. The galaxy learns slowly, Aaron observed. But it learns. Elena looked out at the stars, where ships from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been unimaginable before the swarm crisis. The galaxy had learned that strength came not from power or technology or age, but from the simple willingness to believe that everyone deserved a chance. Her final report to Earth Central Command ended with words that would be carved into monuments across human space. They called us primitive not because we lacked technology, but because we possessed something they had forgotten: the courage to hope for impossible things, and the stubborn refusal to give up on anyone. Today, the galaxy is learning to be human. And perhaps, finally, becoming truly civilized. In the depths of space, on worlds that had been written off as lost causes, new signals began to transmit. Songs and stories and pictures drawn by children, carried by ships crewed with beings who had learned that the most advanced civilizations were the ones that never stopped trying to save each other. The Council had mocked Earth's plea, but in the end, it was the galaxy that had needed saving. And humanity, with all their primitive emotions and impossible hope, had shown them the way.